Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back again. This is Ken Shoulders number 28. And today we have a very, very special guest. We have Chris Beskar, the CEO of Stavati Aerospace. And Chris had some connections with Ken Shoulders. And of course, we're doing all of Ken Shoulders' work in here. So uh, welcome, Chris. How's it going?
Great, great. Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here and glad to be
Yeah,
with everybody on
yeah.
the meeting today.
I thought first thing I would do is maybe introduce everyone. So maybe I'll do that. So everyone obviously knows who Chris is. They've probably seen other interviews and whatnot with him. Brendan, Chris, you've talked to Brendan before. I think it was the first interview that we did with you when you were driving on.
Okay.
And Brendan is the CEO of the Starburst Foundation, which Paul LaViolette started, and that's kind of what this group is about. Actually, is the SubQuantum Kinetics physics group that's connected with the Starburst Foundation, and Brandon is the CEO. So, Brandon, why don't you say hi to Chris?
Hi there, Chris. Yeah, I have a background in physics. So I've got a BSc, MSc, and PhD in physics. And I'm always interested in physics, mysticism, mythology, and consciousness. And I took to Paul's work very well. I like the transdisciplinary nature of it, and the fact that he's looking at astrophysics as well as particle physics, and electronics, and all kinds of climatology and paleontology, mythology, and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's basically a short summary of my background.
Cool. Then we have Chip. Chip, why don't you say a couple things to Chris here and let him know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I spent about 46 years in the oil and gas industry doing applied physics, in the form of geophysics, and have been contactee since I was 8 years old. So the ET issue is an overprint, and a lot of my interest in questions, and we have regular contact. So uh, spirit guides, 9 foot tall type individuals. We also have interaction with a group that is providing some very interesting insight on three-dimensional time and how to do it with quaternions and math and physics that needs to be fixed in our classical physics bullpen, which is basically a disaster. And so, they're helping a lot, those guys, but we have to do the work. They never tell us anything specifically, very, very seldom. So we have to hit the potholes ourselves. And I'm involved in a couple of other groups, a free energy group, which is where most of my questions would be for you today, along those kinds of lines. And we get involved with Dave Rossi as well, and a bunch of the work that he does. And we had a major powwow on consciousness last night. So yeah, the single highest technology in the universe is consciousness, right?
And
So,
and Chip, you also know Moray King, who's the book is written by, right?
yes, had a great conversation with him yesterday, as a matter of fact. And maybe we can coordinate a conflation of maybe you coming back for a visit with Moray. He's a walking encyclopedia. Very interesting guy. And we were talking about actually, EDOs yesterday with
Mhm.
Moray. And he studied Ken Shoulders stuff and summarized a lot of his work as well. So
Chip, remember I asked you to ask Moray about if he ever met Ken Shoulders.
I have not done so yet. I just
Okay,
did the option yesterday to do that, but high
yeah,
on my list. We'll get it done.
cool. And next we have Mary and Chris. Remember we did the interview with the last interview that we did together with Lacey.
Uh-huh.
Well, Mary is Lacey's mother.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So why don't you
Hi,
say hi?
sorry. Hello.
Yeah. Um, and then we have who else do we have here? We have sorry guys, Michael,
Michael,
Michael C. Let's Michael C.
Michael
Chris, how
Glepson.
are you? I'm a
Great.
chemical engineer by profession, by education.
Do a lot of work with hydrogen. I've starting, I would say 2 years ago, really started going down the rabbit hole. Reading a lot of this. I mean, you could call it fringe science, but it's actually true. It's just, I would say some of it's been suppressed, but I've always been, really good with the math, and some of the stuff with you kind of know true things after a while when you've seen it enough times. So there's enough content out in the internet if you want to read about, you know, you can name. There's a whole cast of characters, and it's a lot of the same names keep coming up. But Paul's work, came up a couple of times. I saw there was an active group talking about that. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I'm interested in the I would say mainly the free energy side of things, but also things that you can do to really just help this world out in a big way.
Cool. And then we have Michael D.
Yes, hello. So I'm the newest member of a group. This is, I've only been a few meetings in and been enjoying the discourse here. I'm a software engineer by trade, so that's my day job here in San Bernardino County, California is where I'm located. Yeah, I've had, I guess, just in general, outside my day job stuff and interests in computational topics. I've just always been interested in physics. It's just since the early teens and alternative theories and things that deal with mysteries and paradoxes and things that simply don't make sense. In the standard model and stuff like that. So yeah, hoping to expand my knowledge and participate and help move things forward just to whatever extent that I can.
Cool.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
And I think the last person is Charles. And Charles, Chris, remember I was telling you we're working on a state-of-the-art machine shop facility.
Yes.
Well, Charles is actually an architect, and he's helping draw the building up and whatnot. Yeah. So,
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Yes, sir. Architect in Texas.
Okay.
Where are you at in Texas? I'm sorry. I'm in Houston at the moment.
Sure. Yeah, I'm about 100 miles south of San Antonio, but I'm from the Corpus Christi area, Port Aransas.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess maybe Chris, if you don't mind, could you tell us more about your? Is it a business relationship that you had with Ken Shoulders? Can you tell us more about all of that?
Sure, I'd love to. And I want to thank everybody for having me on this Zoom meeting and meeting everyone. And this is exciting, and it's kind of interesting. I received this goes back a while. I received my extraordinary technology conference invitation. I don't know if you can see this. I won't hold it up. But I don't know how long I've been receiving these, but this came in yesterday in the mail, and I got sent a copy of it. I wasn't where it came in, but I was told we got it. And Moray King is going to be a speaker at the 2025 Extraordinary Technology Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, August 6th to the 10th.
Awesome.
So, this, I think I've been getting this newsletter for quite a long time, or some formulation of it. And it dates back to all of this. And of course, he's going to be discussing a lot about Ken Shoulders. And there's a lot of interesting stuff going on at this conference, which they've got everything from the fourth phase of water to scalar EM radionics and artificial intelligence, and of course some of the more exciting stuff, which is a detection of alien civilizations around Proxima Centauri, which is kind of cool. So you've got all these different events and journals and activities, some of which have been dating back to, well, of course, Nikola Tesla himself, when he used to do this kind of it wasn't disclosure, it was really marketing and advertising and demonstration at World's Fairs, dating back to not the last century, now 2 centuries ago. We're talking about late 1800s, where they had these mega events And of course, that trickled down eventually to where we are today. And so it's a lot of fun. But with respect to Ken Shoulders and that whole world, I was introduced to that officially, really probably in the late 1990s. And the early 2000s is when I started meeting with Ken Shoulders in person.
Okay.
And so Ken was described as a number of things, one of which was the inventor of the microelectronics industry. And I think I've told that story in the past,
Yeah.
where way back when he gave a discussion at MIT about the future of electronics. And of course, this was microelectronics. And allegedly out of that topic, an industry was born, and a number of people who went on to launch their microelectronics businesses did what Ken was talking about. Unfortunately, Ken passed away, and now people are talking about the things that Ken was tinkering with, and it could launch an entirely new industry and change the world and be as dramatic as the microelectronics industry was or
Definitely.
is, if not even more dramatic.
Hmm.
So it's an exciting time in that sense, but Ken's kind of always been on the cusp of things. And I think from a lot of the documents I shared, in our folder that's pretty much open to the public.
Yep.
And that's he dabbled in all kinds of stuff, especially flying machines. So we had this mutual connection through aircraft and exotic power. So we had formed a business relationship with him.
Yeah.
And from our side, on the Stavati end, it was focused on flying machines and propulsion, and of course, exotic technology research and development. So there was clearly a business motive in addition to the desire just to get this out into the public. In addition to that business element, Ken was focused upon fundamental research.
Yeah.
And he had stimulated a lot of fundamental research, especially with the folks who focused on the Journal of New Energy. If you remember, I think it's Hal Fox.
Yep.
Is that name ring a bell? I think that
Yep,
it was
I think
Hal
you're
Fox,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. I could be wrong about the last name, but so the first time I had really seen Ken's apparatus, which was used for nuclear waste mitigation, was
Wow.
really at a facility in Utah, private center, which is where the Journal of New Energy was published.
Oh, wow.
And I'd have to grab my Journal of New Energy to make sure I've got all the names right. But we had some really cool meetings back then. And back then was probably around 2004, 2005, I'd say. So a lot of my personal interaction with Ken Shoulders began in the 2004 timeframe.
Okay.
Up until he passed away. And it was kind of a shock that he passed away. His wife wasn't doing very well for a number of years, and then he kind of passed away rather rapidly, I would say.
Right.
And a number of the people that I knew who were working on some of Ken's work, they contracted some form of cancer, and that's a challenge in dealing with some of this technology, some of the
Definitely.
energies, and you don't really know what the exact cause or stimulation was of the cancer. Of course, now there's a lot of different ways to treat the cancer that's in public, but I won't mention any particular names. But there was a friend of mine, his first name was David, who contracted a tumor from he was working on this.
Oh, wow.
So that was on the nuclear mitigation. But the interesting thing about this whole technology is that it's observable, it works, you can conduct experiments, and there's a breadth of opportunity and possibility in a lot of different fields because of it. Getting into more of the specific history, I'm not exactly certain what I shared with you, but I pulled up our Ken Shoulders folder that I have here. And part of the challenge with all of this is in the for this kind of research, you really do need a serious uh, approach. You need to be well funded to a degree. You need to have serious laboratories. You actually need to take on this technology on a rather official level. It's what's nice about it is it doesn't require a Manhattan Project type level of support, but it
Yeah.
does require support.
Yeah.
And so in the case of Ken Shoulders, there's a need to have machine shops, equipment, laboratory equipment, and the price tag for all of that, is usually in the $2 to $5 million range. So it's not a crazy number, but it's a number nevertheless. And
Yeah.
then to deploy this, really in an industrial level, like you see other things deployed, it does. It's a multi-million-dollar project, and Ken, to take the next step forward, did require investment capitalization. And the challenge when you're working on this sort of thing, especially say 20 years ago, was there was not a lot of interest in fundamental research.
Right.
Most of the funding and support isn't for trying to figure out the nature of the fabric of the universe. It's trying to arrive at a new product.
Yeah.
And so if you can't see the product within like a 2-year horizon, there's not a whole lot of interest in the financial community. And so
Yeah.
that was a challenge. What's kind of cool about Stavati is we can project a product that comes out the door as a result of this technology pretty early on. But the challenge of the aerospace industry itself is that we don't do things that quick. It takes 2 to 5 years, and there's different levels of certification and qualification, and that becomes a hindrance from the funding standpoint. The other issue, of course, is oftentimes the military is the only group that's interested in this kind of thing, and it's either for propulsion or weapons or what have you. And again, the challenge with that is you're bumping against this technology readiness level requirement that if a project doesn't meet a technology readiness level of like 8, 9, or 10, the government doesn't really want to talk about it until it does. And it's really hard to fund some of these projects through small business innovative research grants. And if you're not in constant contact or make an inroad in with some government representative, a program manager who has a vested interest in this sort of thing, it becomes really tough to get anything. So Ken was, really in a tough spot, especially, and it's not just Ken, it's kind of like the entire exotic energy research world.
Yeah.
Everybody's been in a tough spot almost until recently. And, nowadays it's easier to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And it's become a lot more public. But when you're doing this 30, 40 years ago, which is when Ken was working on a lot of this, it's really challenging. And so your colleagues in this field are mostly Russian scientists who were employed by, the Russians, the government, to do this sort of thing. And they had more freedom in that sense than we did.
Definitely.
In academia, and especially in advanced laboratories. So they're out there, doing what they're doing, whether they're paid or not. And it's a lot of fun in that sense. And so that's where you see a lot of these references to Russian developments. And so they make up probably, I don't know, maybe 30% to 50% of the entire backbone of this exotic energy world. And so that's kind of neat. Now, I'm just going to read a little bit here because I've pulled up some documents. And at the Marriott Resort Spa and Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, we had a meeting on November 26th of 2006 with Ken Shoulders, myself, Peter Ostapchenko, Steve Shoulders was there too, his son.
Cool.
And a gentleman, I'll mention his first name was Bill. I won't give the last name, but he was a wealthy casino owner in Las Vegas who could support financially Ken's development and work.
Wow.
And I don't know if I shared this document with you or not. We had
I don't think so.
a number of of meetings. In the official, we actually had official minutes of the meeting, so
Oh,
this is
wow.
like well documented. And we discussed introduction of Ken's son Steve to Bill, and the whole idea was to basically put together a laboratory and machine shop at this time, 2006, that would concentrate on Ken's work. Now, this wasn't really a Stavati project. I mean, we're involved. The goal was, let's get Ken going. That was the mission: support Ken and explore the world of EVO. And so we discussed Ken's accomplishments to date, the science of shoulders and EVO technology,
Wow.
the resource needs for continuing EVO research, the financial needs for Ken and Steve, location of laboratories for the project deliverables, and areas for potential product development, and then the schedule for getting started.
Wow.
And it's let's see. Ken, he was summarized as Ken is the thinker and his son is the implementer doer. That was, generally speaking, Steve is a well-adapted journeyman, class craftsman, machinist, welder, draftsman, and technician for running experiments, all facets of prototype, electronic and mechanical assembly, troubleshooting, and diagnostics.
Wow.
And there's Ken has a helicopter.
What kind of helicopter did
Well, he
you
had a
have?
Hughes 500D.
Nice. Very nice.
Through
Bumblebee.
the Bob Church relationship. And
Wow.
so his early days, you could say that he worked on vacuum microelectronics, superior switching speeds, and then it got into the other microelectronics. But and let's see here. Now, I think you asked about the soft cover book on the history of EVO.
I did actually, because we're gonna be going through it in the group, and I found a black and white version, but none of the pictures showed up. So that's when I asked you if you had a color PDF of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I might. So I've
Cool.
been looking around for it, and I have to see if I have it stuffed on this computer or a different one because I'm traveling. But I'll check into that or try to get a copy of it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But so what it boils down to is we did put together this comprehensive meeting with Ken, which was the business meeting, and unfortunately, I guess what it kind of boils down to is the investor didn't see a roadmap at the end of the day for a product.
Right.
And so, and Ken wasn't really focused on a product. And part of the idea was, let's get this technology out. And he described the Home Depot approach, where you can basically develop a 0-point energy device out of things you could get at Home Depot. And so that was his focus, creating this educational kit.
Cool. That's
At
cool.
the end of the day, getting beyond the basic things. But it's just so when you have general things, potential product development was listed as heat, light, electrical current, radio frequency,
Wow.
and vectored thrust and nano and micro scale tools. So these are very broad research and development products. I mean, when you say you have a technology that can produce light, well, that opens up a whole lot of doorways for all kinds of products, but it's not, I guess, wasn't specific enough for this particular investment group.
Maybe the timing wasn't right either, I think, right? Like now would be the time for this, I think.
Yeah, now's a much, much better time. And the world has dramatically changed. I mean, the world has dramatically changed in the last 36 hours. So
certainly has.
24 hours, 12 hours, whatever.
Yep.
So it's been it's a different world, but so looking back at the history, so yeah, I've known about this for a long time, and we were actively pushing forward with stuff for Ken back in 2006. Then fast forwarding today, it's a different world, and we're focused on turning these Ken shoulders technologies into practical propulsion systems, I guess, is what we're focused on now. So
yeah,
but I'll stop talking for a moment. I know I've said quite a bit and would love to touch on anything specific.
So it's sort of safe to say that the technologies that you're talking about from Ken will be used with Stavati for some of these, like antigravitics and some of these things in the future. Is that what you're
Yeah,
kind of? Yeah,
yeah, I think Ken's work on EVOs represents a gold mine of opportunity,
there it
and
is. Yeah,
exploring it, and what is nice about it in many ways is it's open source. It's out there. The general information is available. It's not being hidden or suppressed in that sense. So it's what you do with it. It's like knowing about a steam engine. So we're going to produce our own systems, or we may buy systems from someone who makes them, generators and different devices. But Ken was very broad in his view on what EVOs may relate to, and he was really concentrating on really the nature of the universe sort of thing,
definitely.
and how this ties into gravity, how it ties into um, the world in general. So he wrote a lot of cool little short summaries about everything from like I said, the gravitational effects of EVOs to the anti-radiation effects to the energy generation effects to does this power a flying saucer to all that. In addition to that, in a very practical sense, he also worked on a lot of free piston compressor motors and
Yes.
engines, a lot of propulsion systems, a lot of UAVs and drones. So it's he was ahead of his time with respect to those sorts of things. And so he certainly wasn't afraid of having propane or butane powered little free piston compressor engines.
Yeah.
And a heavy interest in the machining, the practical making of things. And
Yeah, the prototypes, the actual
yeah.
prototypes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have contact with his son, Steve?
No, not recently.
Okay. And I think last time, with the last interview, we talked about Area 51 a little bit. Did you say that Ken was there at some point?
No, I have no comment on whether Ken was hanging out at Area 51.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I will comment that he was very involved in Stanford Research Institute, SRI.
Yeah.
And so that was a big focus of his. And I know that he was down in Texas quite a bit as well with the Jupiter Toy Company. That was his company that he had formed and was being funded by Bob Church of Church's Fried Chicken, if I'm not mistaken.
And Hal Puthoff also,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Hal Puthoff was SRI. There's kind of the whole SRI gang that was focused on the remote viewing world and the men who stare at goats and all of that. That was the California SRI department of the remote viewing people. And so even Pete Peterson was tied into that. And when you look at this time frame, which was really the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that's where you get this group of curious characters. And Hal Puthoff was really a front runner along with Russell Targ.
Yeah.
And that whole
Swan, the whole bunch of them.
Yeah, Ingo Swan. And
Ingo Swan, yeah.
I've got some books from him that are signed, and it's kind of cool.
Oh, cool.
So it's a whole little group of folks.
Quick question: was Bill Tiller involved in any of those meetings or operations? He did some amazing work on consciousness and then printing consciousness. Very suggestive of stuff we're trying to do with our zero-point energy devices. Imprint consciousness, quantum device that better have some, or it's not going to work. Kind of a thing. So, did you have any interaction with Tiller at all, or?
I personally haven't, but I know others who did.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say yes.
Yeah.
Not me directly, but
yeah. Okay.
Very cool. We actually, Brendan, if you don't mind, do you think you can play that the thing? Because you were in Las Vegas recently, at the Air Dominance conference, I think it was called.
Oh yeah, we were yes,
Yeah, and
we had
that,
we were a sponsor of the Air Dominance conference and a presenter. We had a
cool.
booth.
Hear that?
Yep. And I think most of that, Chris, was about the SM 39 for the most part, was it? Or can you tell us a little bit more about the conference?
Sure. Well, the Air Dominance Summit is really a summit and lecture discussion 2-day event that was conducted in Henderson, Nevada, earlier this May, and it was hosted by IDGA, and it was really a Boeing event. Boeing asked for this event to happen years
Okay.
ago, and it's been sponsored by Boeing largely, and it focuses on air dominance fighter aircraft for the most part. So there's a lot of topics. I mean, the big topic that was being discussed was air dominance in collaborative combat aircraft. Now, Stavati came in. We had our presentation. We were a second tier sponsor along with Booz Allen Hamilton and I think General Atomics. And so we were the only actual company that had a booth, which was kind of curious. They have a 10 by 10 booth,
Yeah.
and so we featured our booth, and I gave a 30-minute talk on our Razor, and it was a nice because we were the only company that actually talked about an air dominance fighter. The Boeing F-47 has been brought out, but they haven't really
Yep.
disclosed much about the airplane and not really saying very much. So we were out there discussing the Razor, and I gave a 30-minute talk. Unfortunately, the audio quality was so terrible that we really can't present it
Oh,
as
too bad.
video. Yeah, it was I thought it was a pretty good talk, and but it was a lot of fun, and so we were able to present what we're doing to really everybody in the fighter airplane business, and it had a really good attendance. We had a lot of folks, of course, from the United States Air Force and Navy, Marine
Yep.
Corps, and then we had a lot of foreign participants. And so that was, a really good event. We'll be doing some other events this year. We're going to be at the Air Force Association Airspace and Cyber Conference. We have a booth there as well
Cool.
for 3 days. That's in September. And then immediately thereafter, we're doing the Miramar Air Show in Miramar,
No way.
Marine Corps Air Station. So we'll be there for
Wow.
at least 2 days. We got to transport our show from Washington, D.C. to Miramar within a 2-day window. So hopefully we'll get there on Friday, but we'll be there on Saturday for sure. So it's a much bigger event, and it's really for the public. It's a free event at Miramar,
Wow.
unlike the Air Dominance Summit, which they charged a pretty hefty ticket. And of course the Air Force Association show. I think it's free to see the exhibit hall, the Air Force. So it'll be fun. And then there's other shows coming up in the future. But that's a place where we're definitely presenting publicly what we're up to. I'm currently traveling. We were going to do the Freedom Fest in where is that? Palm Springs, I think. But I think they just concluded that. That's sort of an interesting event. I don't know if anybody here has ever been to Freedom Fest in Palm Springs, but the timing just didn't work, and I'm currently traveling, so I wasn't able to have our booth coordinated event there.
Yeah.
So there's
Was
a lot of
David
cool stuff.
Wilcock in Henderson with you?
He was, yeah. He actually was there. That was pretty neat. So he played a straight man, just focused on airplanes and non-exotic things.
Yeah.
The Air Dominance Summit, and this kind of is sort of an underlying qualifier for all these conversations. You have multiple worlds out there. you have the very stiff, straightforward world of aerospace defense, where the F-15 is still pretty much the world's premier air superiority fighter. That's
Wow.
how things are.
Wow.
And you're focused on making a tangible product and employing people and rolling things out the door. And we can touch on that more. And then there's this other world of the more exotic technology. And
Yes.
just about every airplane company has an exotic technology department. You could say that the aerospace industry is where exotic technology departments came from.
Definitely.
And so, that's an entirely different parallel world. And it can range from the development of the U-2 spy plane or the atom bomb, all the way into the most far out, exotic, wacky conversations you could ever conceive. And, it's almost, there are two ships operating in parallel in the night who shall never cross, but occasionally they do.
Yeah.
And that's where you get books like The Quest for Zero Point from Nick Pope that came out back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Which said some stuff and mentioned some things that, kind of breaches this parallel world. And so it's really curious. And so that's, what we're discussing now is kind of a gap between the two. And really what Ken did is Ken put out publications that changed the nature of our reality to some degree. And they don't necessarily shake the pillars of physics, but they do point out a lot of really interesting phenomena.
Definitely.
And the way he released his information is in such a manner that it can't fall under the realm of classified technology. So a lot of it was never classified. And, he had, I had been to his house. We had multiple meetings. And he at one point had brought up the whole fact that every so often he's visited by the Office of Naval Intelligence.
Yeah.
And they will come and they will visit. They'll send 3 people out in uniform and they'll sit and they'll discuss these things and they'll get overwhelmed and they'll go away. And there's really no feedback. There's really no funding. There is no funding, but there's not a whole lot of feedback. And then they'd come back at some other appointed time in the future to see what's new. And this went on for a while. And perhaps the final distillation of what all came of that, shortly after Ken's death, more or less, or before to some degree, was the patents that we brought up about the more exotic Navy technologies.
Yes.
That ties into Salvador Payas.
Yep.
So that's and then the question is, okay, so these patents have come out. Does this mean that the Navy is actually working on anything, or does it just mean that they're acknowledging the fact that this might exist?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how much you can say, but I do have some screenshots that I took from some of David Wilcock's presentations that you had done with him and whatnot about the Hawk. Is that something that we can talk about, or?
Sure. We can talk about anything that the Navy published. Sure.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then Brendan, do you mind bringing up those last photos? Because if it's cool, we can talk a little bit more about this, because it was released for public information. They're not in this group. This is for the interview, Brendan. It's in the other group.
The ordinary group. Do you mean the 10 shoulders 28?
Yeah. Remember we put them at the end?
Okay.
Those four shots. This is maybe a great time to let Chris tell us what he can about this.
So the 4 shots at the end is what you're saying.
Yeah. So this is let's start with that one. Now, I did get this from David Wilcock, and I don't know if you can confirm that this is the Hawk, Chris, or not.
I can't confirm that that's the Hawk. It it does look very similar to some things China is building.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Wow. The other thing about this picture is it's kind of blurry. It's almost like you're looking through a little bit of a mirage. And is that maybe that mirage, maybe the vacuum plasma bubble sheath that makes this thing work?
Um, I'd be more inclined to say it's just the camera work itself.
Okay,
Um, but that gets into there was an Aviation Week article published in the 90s that talked about low observable aircraft, and there were really three articles. One article actually refers directly to what Stavati was doing in the 90s, and that's a pretty cool article.
yep,
The other one refers to the ability to reduce the optical signature, basically, like a cloaking device to make the aircraft difficult to see.
right,
The other thing that we're very focused on, or have been focused on experimentally in aerospace, has been all of the magneto gas dynamic effects, be it for propulsion or for signature reduction.
right,
And
right.
so, this picture, just shows a triangular demonstrator aircraft, and it does. I'd say it's more of a photo effect rather than an actual propulsion effect.
Okay, that you're seeing. Okay. I think that you can go to the next one there, Brendan, because I think this is the, oh, okay, we can do that one too. This is just stuff from SubQuantum Kinetics and Paul Violette's book, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, where he's talking about this G well that happens in front of the ship, or the B2 in this case, essentially, because that's what the book is about, and how there's a gravity hill behind it from subquantum kinetics aspect and viewpoint. And I just kind of wanted to show everyone that this is part of Paul's work. Paul did something called the Aquarian mono elevator, I believe, and it had a double hull design. And I know that you've talked about double hull designs in the past, and some of the things that you can do with them, and then some of the things that Stavati has done with them. I think you referred to that just recently here in the conversation.
Might be able to bring that up. So I could bring that up and see if in Paul's book. Let me just have a quick look. The Aquarian device.
Yeah,
Um,
because I'm told that if Paul had patented the Aquarian device, then Salvador Payas and the Navy probably wouldn't have had the chance to do it. And this is this is it here. And it does use like a negative, like a double hull design. I don't know if you've ever seen this, Chris, or
Oh
not.
yeah, it's so using a double hull. Um, so we've played with that since the very beginning, and there's an article that I can share that touches on this, but basically just focusing on this particular thing. Um, this explains a lot. It's one approach to really achieve a few different things. One is a propulsion effect, and another is a low observability effect.
Okay.
And it depends on if you're only focused on propulsion and you don't care about observability. That's one approach. If you do care about propulsion, then your material observability, then your materials are different. But this is an approach that allows you to arrive at a flying machine.
Yeah. 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 So that's Paul's work. And this, well, there you go, 1985, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is right about the same time that Jupiter Technologies. When was that company formed? Because I know the book was written in '87, I believe, right?
Well, let's see. So here's a patent from the Jupiter Toy Company that was issued in 1990. and that's his. So it's definitely in the early 90s.
Right.
When it was formed, I'd have to look that up. I don't remember when it was formed. I would say in the 80s sometime.
Okay, so it was all kind of around the same time period, because SubQuantum Kinetics sort of came out in the early 80s as well too, from Paul's work
Paul
as
was
well.
publishing in the published papers in the early 80s, but the book, the SQK book, SubQuantum Kinetics book first came out in 1994.
90, yeah, yeah, very cool. Can you bring up the other one that are in this group too? Because it's I think they're the other direction. Yeah, we can. Yeah, that one. So this is something that was released through the Pius patents, and it is one of the configurations for the Hawk, I understand. And again, we see this double hull design here, Chris, right? One thing that I'd like to point out is the dielectric liner, the asymmetrical dielectric liner, which is kind of at the very bottom of this diagram. I think that's kind of important, and I don't know if you can talk about that at all, or the dielectrics that they use.
Well, the dielectrics can be a lot of different substances. You know, on the earliest side, it's a type of rubber.
Oh wow, I didn't know
So
that.
you have a structure. You know, you have an internal solid hull, and the question is the outside hull is that skin? Is it a bandpass structure
Right,
that will let radar or other electromagnetic energy through, or is it a solid structure like a metal?
right,
And it really depends on what you're attempting to achieve. And so you can have that be a graphite structure. You know, it states the mold line skins are electrically charged. Well, there's ways to electrically charge bandpass structures. And so it looks, you know, they're containing the high frequency EM wave within this hull. And this particular kind of configuration, this is the same sort of configurations we were promoting years ago and focused on our multi-role fighter programs.
yes,
So what we were doing, and the challenge faced by Stavati, is twofold. One was we wanted to achieve an aircraft that had a variable geometry swing wing, but could still be stealthy. So how do you achieve that? Well, you achieve that by using an advanced type of stealth technology.
right,
And so in our case, we had a double hull structure, and the outer skin was bandpass and the inner skin was not. And in between that inner skin, you can manipulate whatever gets trapped in between using a number of different means. One means is a plasma. You can use a plasma to do that.
yeah,
And so as soon as you get into putting plasmas between double hulls and you're doing high frequency EM wave manipulation, then you can also achieve propulsion effects. And so the next cool feature of that is the ability for the vehicle to use that to take off and land vertically.
yes,
Now, can you use it as a primary propulsion system? Sure, you could. Now, in the case of what we were doing back in, say, 1992 or 93, and in that whole time frame, even before Stavati Corporation was formed, the propulsion system was twofold. You know, we were using a jet engine, an advanced jet engine at the time, derivative of a new jet engine. But it wasn't just to provide forward propulsion, it was to provide energy generation. So you provide, you know, you have enough megawatts being pulled off the engine to support what you're trying to do with the double hull structure.
gotcha.
And, you know, we had put out some different papers, some of which are on DTEC. But this, you know, this has been an ongoing conversation for a long time. And then you get into the whole idea of plasma stealth. And, you know, we as an industry, the aerospace industry, discussed plasma stealth technology way back in the 90s. And again, the Russians had worked a lot on this.
Yeah.
And the question was, is it on an exterior skin of the airplane? Is it outside of the plane? Is it embedded between cavities? Or is it actually something that you have within a double hull structure? Now, the challenge with the double hull structure is that it's more difficult to produce and to have more significant tooling and production equipment. And if you're using composites, that means more expensive molds. And of course, that's just increased cost. But it gets the job done and allows you to have an all aspect, low observable aircraft that is not planform aligned, which means it doesn't have to look like the B-2. You know, in the case of aircraft like the B-2, and most airplanes made today, all of them basically, you have a very traditional construction technique. It's really similar to how airplanes have been built since the 50s, where you have internal frames, you have spars and ribs at times, and bulkheads.
Yeah.
And those are skinned, and the skin is directly attached to those frames, usually through rivets or screws or some other fastener.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that, especially when you take apart an F-16 or even a B-2 bomber, there is no double hull. There is no place to stuff this sort of thing. So any electromagnetic effects are on the outside of the airplane, along the skin.
Oh, okay.
So what is revolutionary about this is, it acknowledges that there's an internal double skin. Now, the problem with these kind of patents is they're kind of a Johnny come lately sort of thing, not to be mean or anything, but there's already prior art that's out there.
Definitely. Yeah.
Some of, to some degree that prior art is classified, and to some degree it's completely out there in the general public.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see that this work is out there. But what it really is, it's more of a statement of possibility rather than a protection effect. Because if you really took this to test, it might not hold up in a patent court, but it's something that there's an acknowledgement of, this is an approach to achieving a few different effects, including propulsion. And so you got your microwave emitters in there and a high frequency EM wave, and presumably you've got some type of plasma activity.
Yeah. And that's a resonant chamber that's in between the two. How thick, what's the thickness between them, or the dimensions between the hulls?
Well, in this image, it looks like it's quite a bit. I mean, if this was a 50-foot wingspan vehicle, then you've got, a lot of feet there. So but it's probably not a scale drawing. In the case of what we were doing things along the line of 3 to 6 inches.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I was wondering about that part.
Yeah, it's not super thick.
By the way, Chris and Eddie, I got a message here from Gabrielle on the signal. I don't know if you want me to, it's a bit long, but it's a message to Chris on the, do you want me to read it out?
Gabriel's he's one of the guys that's down in Brazil, and he wasn't able to join, but I think he had a question for you. So if you don't mind.
So it says, Eddie, here's a message I would like to read to Chris. Left it written so that if I can't participate in the call, you can read it to him. The message is a bit long, although I tried to shorten it as much as I could. I had to give a brief introduction before I started asking the question, otherwise the question would be meaningless. And question 2 complements question 1. Question 3 is just out of curiosity. There is no need for him to explain much about it. I just wanted to know his opinion on question 3. If it is possible to add it to the questions asked to him, I would appreciate it. If not, that's also fine.
Well, what have you got?
So I said another detail, Eddie. Let me just see if he's put it in the questions. So he then said another detail, Eddie. If I could ask him this before or after the recording, and not during the recording, I would also appreciate appreciate it. So he also asked that question not during the recording.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we can ask it after then.
Let me just see here. Here are the questions.
Maybe just go with the one question,
Okay, the
just for
first
time's sake.
question is, what brings matter into this black state? Could it be reduction in the energy density of the ether? So black state, I think he means EVOs or quantum vacuum. So could it be reduction in the energy density of the ether or quantum vacuum to the point of dissolving the concentrated positive energy of matter and bringing it to the neutral point? This is the reduction in ether pressure would need to occur within the matter itself, affecting each atom, not just around it. Correct. I'm not quite sure I understand that. Anyway, do you understand, Eddie?
Not really. Was that the third question too?
That was the first question.
To just go to the third one, maybe.
Okay. Third, is it possible to travel to the past? Or do you believe, as Einstein theory suggests, that only one-way travel into the future is possible with no return?
Ooh, well, there's a good question.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Okay, so if you believe that positrons and antiparticles are traveling back in time, that a positron is just an electron traveling back in time, then you'd have to say that yes, it's possible to send at least particles back in time. So we could get messages from the future. Can we go back in time? Can we create time machines and things of that? I'd like to say no, because if we can, it really does change things a lot. It can cause a lot of problems and mess things up and gets us into this whole world of multiple universes, and it's such a
Paradoxes.
thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of time travel. I'm really not focused on time travel, but there is this idea that antiparticles are simply particles moving back in time, and that's that's kind of a something that you can read about in A Brief History of Time. You can read about that in a lot of the works of Richard Feynman. It's not it gets into all of his diagrams and Feynman diagrams. And so can we travel back in time? I don't know. I've had a lot of interesting stories. So,
very cool.
As a DeLorean owner, I have a lot of.
You have a DeLorean?
Yeah.
Wow, no way. That's cool.
So do I. So do I.
Really?
Yep.
No way. Wow.
3859.
Okay. Well, I had a heck of a time getting a water pump. Gosh, they were out of stock for like 2 years, but I got a new water pump and I'm putting it in.
Yeah, go to a Volvo dealer. I think you can get one for 262 V8 or V6.
Oh.
Or bring it to Houston. He's got all the parts here.
That's right. Well, I was waiting for Houston. Yeah. Well, I got it from Houston eventually.
Yeah. I know Steve real well. So.
Good. Yeah.
That's really cool.
88 miles an hour, time reversal.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Right. And does anyone else in the group here have any questions for Chris too?
Well, I did. It's a little philosophical, and I don't want to touch too much on that. But one of the things I see in Sal Paez is, patents in a lot of things that have come out over the years. The magic sauce is nearly always missing. And yes, I understand electrogravitics and the double hell design and the microwave emitter to stir up the whole ion soup and create a potential, shear the bejesus out of the vacuum field, and out comes gravity and a lot of other interesting things. But God damn it, the actual process is still missing. And that's where I place EVOs.
Yes.
It's kind of the veil transfer function, if you will, between our classical one-dimensional time world and the quantum vacuum. That's the way I see. That's why I see that being so damn important. They seem to have some amazing capabilities, obviously for transmutation and things like that, but creating charge densities, highly differentiated, vacuum fields, gradient fields is what they do best. And looking back over the years, all the inventors, Bedini and Bearden, and even Tesla himself, they never, in my opinion, ever put their finger on how and why the damn thing worked. They get always very close. And I like to think that we wouldn't have to rely on source for that last little bit of magic every time it happens. I like to believe that anthropomorphically, that if we can imagine it, we can define it, and maybe even do 6-dimensional mathematics with quaternions to get this whole classical physics thing into the modern century with 3-dimensional time. So do you kind of see it in that way? I mean, that's obviously you were very interested in what Ken Shoulders was doing. Ken was, I don't think, really great at promoting the systemic nature of what he was experimenting with. And the rubber hits the road, the clutch for the vacuum, and all this kind of stuff, I truly believe. And that's not well discussed, because like you said, we need money, we need products, we need to engineer the goddamn thing, and then we'll figure the math out later, or the theory around it, multi-universe or whatever. So would you have any comments on why the whack works?
Yeah, well, I sure do. And that's where you get into, kind of what we were driving at. And that's, we have a particular customer that has a mountainous country, and they believe if they ever get invaded, they're not going to have airports anymore. So they need their airplanes to take off and land vertically.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were asking for an F-35B or something that can do what an F-35B can do. And I said, well, the problem is that I'm not really excited about the F-35B. That approach to vertical takeoff and landing was really great in the 1960s. And, the Russians did it with their Yak. And as a consequence, the Harrier, even the Harrier is a more elegant solution than an F-35. And so I said, let us do what we want to do and just address this issue, how we want to address it. And they said, okay, fine, we will, because we're an independent country and we're one of the leading technology countries in the world. And if you want to do it however you want to do it, great. And so that's what we've been focused on the military side, using basically a double hull design to achieve vertical takeoff for an airplane.
Wow.
So that's, now this particular country isn't going to be procuring anything for a couple of years, but they're working on it. And so that's on the military side. Now on the civil side, there's our hover car, and the hover car is the same idea. It's this vehicle that will not use fans or blades or propellers or anything like that to take off and land vertically. It's focused on a more exotic approach to vertical takeoff and landing. Now, long before I had met Ken Shoulders, I was focused on, how do you achieve anti-gravity? That's
right.
been the big focus. How do you do that? And there's a lot of publications about that. You get into Townsend Brown, and that's really exciting stuff. But that is missing the secret sauce.
Exactly.
It's very vague. I mean, basically, they're telling you how to make a capacitor. And so, there are very few flying capacitors in the world. And so what is the secret sauce? And, there's hints that what really happened with that technology is it got gobbled up into the aerospace industry. And the only way to really get any tangible information about what could have happened to it is when you look at the records of Dassault and what they were doing in France. And they had worked on that technology and they had achieved a flying machine. And of course, Dassault makes the Mirage fighters and the Falcon jets and all that sort of thing. So, and they make SolidWorks now. They're big, half their business is software and CATIA, that sort of, industry. And of course, they're not sharing any information. They're a French defense company, very tied to the government.
Yeah.
And it's been publicly admitted, I guess, that there's maybe 4 or 5 or 6 countries in the world that have what you'd consider anti-gravity technology or levitation technology. And when India wanted to play in that field, and there was some evidence that India had played in that field and achieved some stunning results, immediately our arms embargoes to India dropped, and we've been trying to sell them F-18s ever since. And India is a really curious country because they have a desire for extremely advanced technology. They're having an extremely hard time getting new fighters into production of their own design. And at the same time, they want to be part of the world. They want to be part of the Western world. They have this thirst and hunger to be accepted and recognized. And so they're willing to do what many parties are willing to do, which is not pursue disruptive technology in order to just fit in and be part of the world order. That you see with electrical power companies. I mean, right now, the energy industry in the United States is in a really weird position because up until very recently, we were shutting down all the nuclear power plants. And if you go to California, they're shutting down nuclear power plants completely. And the major utilities in California have no desire to do any advanced research. I mean, they're very focused on linemen. They love linemen. They have linemen rodeos. They have big linemen events. The lineman is very popular. So, and the lineman's job is to go up on poles and make sure we have power.
Yeah.
And that is completely contrary by over a century to the things we're discussing, which is probably wireless energy transmission and energy that doesn't necessarily even require a centralized power system.
Yeah.
And so, there has been, I wouldn't say suppression so much, but a buyout, and then on a corporate level, a desire to not pursue certain areas. And so 95% of all electrical engineers and engineers in general are not moving into these realms until they're given the mandate to go work on it. So in our case, it's giving people the mandate to go work on it and say, here's the resources, here's the product, and here's the project, and let's get this done. At the same time, there's this ongoing frustration that we're getting rockets built that essentially are going to go to Mars, when anybody who knows the problem knows that a rocket is not going to get us to Mars in the manner that we need to get to Mars or anyplace else.
Yeah.
And Musk knows that, obviously.
I mean, the rockets he is building cannot carry the same payload as a semi-truck.
Wow.
It's that simple. And we need to do more than semi-trucks to go back and forth to Mars. So, or whatever planet we're going to.
By the way, Eddie, when I was reading the questions from Gabriel, he wanted a little introduction first, and then you can understand question 1 and 2. So he's going to be home in about 10 or 15 minutes. So if I could just read the introduction, then the questions 1 and 2 will make more sense. It's a little introduction.
Brendan, did Chris get finished with his comments?
Yeah, let's Chris finish, and then Michael D's got a question. I think that Gabriel said he was going to try and jump on the call. We'll just let him do his thing. Yeah, we got to be respectful of Chris's time here too, because we also have an interview with him after this. So, yeah.
Well, so I think the secret sauce is there. I think just kind of wrapping it up. With respect to Ken Shoulders, I think he had a lot more work to do in getting the EVO as in basically all the different deployments he saw possible. And so he was the front runner in this research, and he acknowledged that there are these effects and possibilities. And so when you get into the high-end physics of EVOs, he wrote what he published is out there. We can read it. We can interpret it. He viewed EVOs more as the result of perhaps a spark. It's like what is the nature of sparks almost, the charge cluster effect. And he had a lot more work to do as far as propulsion. When you get into the Townsend Brown approach,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think it's more of a matter of what has been just not disclosed publicly.
Yep.
And so that's where there's more work that has been done and more work that needs to be done. But there's also a whole stockpile of other approaches. And so in a lot of ways, we're focused on more of an inertial propulsion approach for certain vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen those demonstrated, and other people have seen those too. And what you do not want to do is get stuck in this ionocraft mode, which is very lightweight vehicles that are being lifted using electromagnetism.
Yeah, lifters, right?
Yeah, lifters essentially.
Yeah.
And so, and you can do a lot with lifters, but the challenge with that is it's almost like having a hot air balloon. It's just a different approach. But as far as payload and cargo, it's not really the most efficient way to go about making things fly.
Yeah. Cool.
So, real quick question, Chris, how do you see the potential for full disclosure affecting your company? Say, for instance, in June of 2026, Solar Warden dematerializes a ship that's 10 miles in diameter. All right, so all the other stuff aside, how are you, and maybe you can't talk about it, but how are you positioning yourself looking to the full realm of quantum propulsion? I know for your projects to generate investment and money, you've got to go with classical winged aircraft and fossil fuel propulsion. So do you have, or maybe you can't say, do you have a locked vault where you're doing stuff like the walk, like the hovercraft? Are you looking at crystallized light engine cores, for crying out loud, which I happen to know exist?
Sure.
And will fly 6 million times the speed of light. So is that something you can hint at a little bit? Because I sense that's where you really want to work on.
Yeah. So if a flying saucer landed on the White House lawn tomorrow and it was publicly known and everybody says hello and it's good, we are immediately in the spacecraft business.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
a flip of a switch. And now here's the problem with the whole idea of disclosure. We just took some B-2 bombers from the 1990s and we finally attacked and decimated an Iranian nuclear program that we know has been operating since 1967. And it's a good thing in a way because it makes the world a safer place. Let's all go with it made the world a safer place because now the terrorists don't have nuclear weapons. Okay, that's a very good argument. Great argument. I'm in full support of that. But there's the other argument, which is one that this is a very long time in the making. And Iran has been a threat for a long time, ever since, the Ayatollah Khomeini took over in 1979.
Yeah.
So we've been waiting a long time to do something like this. But the fact is that we used very conventional technology to achieve this. And we're still very, very focused on conventional technology. And this gets into the whole issue of when is any type of acknowledgement that there's, extraterrestrial life going to come out publicly. And my view is don't wait for it, just live in that world anyhow to as much as possible. And like I said,
Yes.
we've got a show coming out on August 6th that's going to talk about how there's probably intelligent life on Proxima Centauri. And there probably is, and there probably is a lot of intelligent life all over the universe.
Definitely.
We're just part of it. So I think part of it is with our own efforts, we want to see a reliable space transportation system that is very similar to what we have with semi-trucks and very similar to what we have with commercial airlines operating within our lifetime. And hopefully, we've said we want to achieve warp drive by 2035. Part of that is a investment issue. Part of it's a lobbying issue. getting Congress and everyone else to accept certain things. But I have some really strong opinions about what has happened in the disclosure world in the last 2 years, which has really kind of seemed to just hit a brick wall.
Yeah, yeah.
And
we were talking about that just the other day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can remember, Chris, the first time that David Wilcock introduced you, he said, and I was taken back when he said this. He said that you were the premier builder of spacecraft in the world. Now, I don't know if he was projecting that into the future or if that was just, what can he say about that?
Well, David
I know
said
that
a
you
couple
love
things he
spacecraft.
probably, David said some things he probably shouldn't have said. And,
there you go.
As he always does.
and so we kind of had to walk some stuff back. And this whole issue we've certainly inspired a lot of different designs in science fiction, and we've been doing a lot of things for 30 years. And we have the documented evidence to show that, yeah, here's a Chris Beskar design from 30 years ago. And we have a really cool chart that shows how these different things merge in. But I'll read a conventional aircraft statement. So if you go to Aviation Week in Space Technology, April 29th of 1996, on page 40, there's a statement, and it's in an article called Stealth Investments Worry ACC Planners. This is from David Fulgham of Aviation Week. And the quote that I highlight is that since the Gulf War, the Air Force has supported 3 VLO, very low observability aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft projects in the black world. The first was described as remarkable in its ability to evade radar, is a product of an Air Force generated requirement, according to a senior defense official. These fighter-class aircraft, one manned and unmanned, remain hidden in the black world and may only provide seed technology for subsequent projects. Well, the reason this article was written, if you can imagine this, so Aviation Week publishes in 1996 an article on page 40, on the bottom of page 40. This is underneath another article about, that's a picture of an F-16 dropping some bombs. It's almost ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're breaking
Gabriel might be joining in about 5 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Let's deprioritize that, Brendan, between you and I. Let's just hold that off. I'm not going to discuss it. Let's just hold that off for a little while.
Yeah. That's fine.
Gabe and I talk all the time.
All right.
Are you there, Chris? Did we lose him or?
Yeah, I think he said he was traveling. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's got a bad Wi-Fi in a hotel, maybe.
Yeah. I think maybe we'll let, when he comes back, we'll let Michael D, because he's been waiting quite a long time to ask the question. And then if there's time, we'll let Gabriel. He left, so he'll jump back in when he can here. Very cool. Some interesting answers from him, actually. Some great questions, you guys, as a matter of fact, too. Very, very cool. Yeah. And looking forward to the interview with him after this as well. It's going to be really awesome.
So 2 words caught my attention: warp drive by 2035, 10 years out. So he's looking at it.
Well, I can remember, I think it was the second interview with him or the third one, because this is the 5th. We're going to be doing the 5th one coming up here. I can remember him saying of the 4 ways that we could make that hover car do anti-gravity, we already have 3 of them that are they're being developed, and it's the SM-36 Stelma, I believe, was the plane that he said we should look at, because that's where they're going to be developing the technology. So he said, follow the development of that plane, and that will show you more about these different ways that we're talking about doing this anti-gravitic thing. I also remember talking to Chris and saying that true anti-gravity is actually 2 counter-rotating torsional fields that cause this lifting effect, essentially. Yeah. Hey, Chris, we lost you for a little bit there.
It
Let's see here. Yeah, I apologize for that. My computer died in mid-sentence. I guess they don't want me talking about the Aviation Week article from '96 that admits that the body made a jet fighter. So
these guys are idiots.
Yeah, I'm a little irritated at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's that whole sequestration of information. Not most of us are just so goddamn fed up with it. The three-letter guys aren't sociopaths anymore. They're psychopaths, and they need to go away. And so, yeah, it's holding up disclosure brick wall 2 years ago. Spot on. Everybody else feels the same thing. We have made no progress in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot to be disclosed, that's for sure.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, huge amounts of information. I think Michael D might have had a question for Chris.
Yeah, I had posted it in the chat. It was probably a simple question. I don't know how far you can get into it, but it was just basically when you were talking about the double hull, I was just curious to know if like how material surfaces or geometries maybe within or however however might work would influence like the desired effects that you were talking about. Like, does that have any influence or effect at all?
Well, it's more of a material science effect. It's not so much the configuration. I think there are more efficient configurations from a distribution system. I mean, if you want a uniform system, you can go with a sphere or like a disc shape. I mean, a disc shape is a more streamlined sphere. So you're able to get a hull where you have the same effects everywhere. Now, if you want more complicated configurations, you can achieve that, but you're going to have to put in microwave emitters or magnetron or boosters or things like that to have it tailored to your configuration. So if you're asking, is a flying saucer a good shape? Well, it's a good shape from an aerodynamic standpoint in some respects because it's not a sphere. Flying through the air, you have drag and it's easier to distribute because you don't. It's like, why put wings on your spaceship? Well, the reason you might want to put wings on your spaceship is because when it's in an atmosphere, it's just effective to have wings. You get the benefit of that as opposed to being a rock. Although we can get rocks to fly, like the lifting bodies made by Martin Aerospace. But yeah, there's a simplification in your design configuration that makes your propulsion system interface easier with what you're trying to achieve. But you could use this to have any shape you like. You could have a football, you could have a square, you could have a cube. A cube, if you wanted to. And so there's a lot of different shapes you could go with.
Yeah, it was my understanding from William Tompkins' work that the Germans, they had built all different kinds of shapes when they were they were basically using charge clusters back in the day as well too, right?
They may have been, yeah. I mean, they certainly had different shapes, and the degree to which they were using charge cluster technology, that's more information to dig into.
Yeah. And also, Chris, I wanted to let you know that in the future, I've got this paper that was written by John Hutchison himself that describes all of his electronic apparatus and what he was doing with it and whatnot back in 1990s, I think it was. And I wanted to go through it in the group here. So maybe I could invite you back. I know that there's a connection between Ken Shoulders and John Hutchison. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there is, and I think I shared with you that presentation that Ken Shoulders had that discussed John Hutchinson's work, and there's a lot of familiarity, and that was something that we were actually exploring in the movie Levitation that we had put together, but wasn't released. And so that's kind of a disappointing, brick wall effect because we had I had done my part in that. We did our recording, and then 2 days later, David Grush came out, and there was a big disclosure event. And I almost feel as if that was an approach to kind of do a I don't know if you'd call it a counter strike or just to help to do damage control. I guess damage control is the word I was looking for. Do damage control, and might have been released in the Levitation movie. And so, I just feel like there's a lot of things that even just what happened with my computer now, it's kind of weird that all of a sudden I get disconnected. And I'm trying to get my computer up and running. I don't know if the system was attacked, but I'll do it. I think we'll have to postpone our interview until I get my computer back up, maybe for another weekend. And I think we've talked to, we've had a great discussion here today, and it's gone over an hour, and I think we've covered some nice material. But there's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done in the field, and that I think is hopefully we're able to contribute to it, and hopefully the scientific community in general can engage and get a lot accomplished using these new fundamental technologies and views of the universe.
Yeah.
Ed, I have one last question for Chris, real quick. Did you ever make an acquaintance with Cal Richardson in and around Area 51? Do you know that name? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
I can, sorry. Hello, guys.
Yeah, Gabriel, or Chris, this is Gabriel. He's from Brazil. And Gabriel, maybe just one question. We're just about to wrap it up here.
Okay.
And Chris is having problems with his computer, so.
Okay, I will try to be fast in my reading, sorry. Okay, so here we go. I am an independent researcher fascinated by phenomena such as invisibility, intangibility, and the teleportation of matter. I believe that EVOs, as described by Ken Shoulders, may hold the key to these effects. They seem to leak from our reality into another one, which Shoulders calls the low-pressure universe, where resistance to motion might not exist and the conception of distance could collapse, since the ether or quantum vacuum would cease to structure space as we know it. Unlike photons or neutrinos, which have no mass or nearly none and no charge, yet still oscillate in the ether, matter in this black state would appear exempt even from this interaction, the interaction with the surrounding ether, potentially allowing for teleportation. So here are my questions. I will just read two questions very quick. What brings matter into this black state? Could it be a reduction in the energy density of the ether or quantum vacuum to the point of solving the concentrated positive energy of matter and bringing it to a neutral point? This reduction in ether pressure would need to occur within the matter itself, affecting each atom, not just around it. And the second question is, how is the destination defined during teleportation? I've heard it said that the mind could guide the process, since the laws of physics might differ in this state, as Shoulders suggests. But if we wanted to avoid using the mind, could the destination be defined by specific frequencies? Scalar frequencies, perhaps by oscillating the bubble, the field that shifts matter out of phase, transferring it to this low pressure universe along the x, y, and the z axis, reaching the destination through field resonance propulsion as Alan C. Holt proposed? If so, how could we determine those frequencies? So, sorry if I am not very clear. I think maybe you understand. Okay, sorry.
Sure. No, I'll touch on the last question first. So, how do you define where you're going to go before you get there? And so, as a general rule of thought, when dealing with any of these exotic techniques to say teleport or hyperspace or go to the whole idea of quantum teleportation,
My general view is that it does tie directly into consciousness, and it's a matter of you thinking about where you want to be. If you have a strong desire to be there, if you wish to, you're focused and concentrating on arriving at a certain destination that you have predetermined in your mind, that is going to be the ultimate driving force for these quantum effect type of systems. Whenever you get into the quantum entanglement, it doesn't really matter the mechanism you're using, whether it's some derivation of charge cluster technology or something else. The basic idea behind the whole nature of teleportation is you think where you want to be, and that's, where you arrive. You get into problems when you think you want to be somewhere, you get there, and then you don't believe you could get there. Then you get into issues of, either you're coming back or you're halfway there or you're embedded in some wall or something like that, and life is not good and you might be dead. But as far as the general idea behind teleportation, now the mechanism isn't as important as the intent. And I think there's a lot of different mechanisms to do it. And this even gets into the idea of levitating monks. It gets into the idea of people being able to teleport just by thinking strongly about it, or whatever that happens to be. There's a lot of different pathways and methodology. And I think, part of it is this gets into the spiritual aspect of things, into the metaphysical. When a person dies, what happens? Well, if you believe that we're just dust and nothing more, well, so be it. But if you think that humans have a spirit and a consciousness and a soul that extends beyond our physical form, then presumably when you die, when you're freed from your body, when you're able to explore the universe through your spirit being or your soul, I think the way it works is you think about being somewhere and you get there, unless there's some other restrictions imposed upon you.
Like the higher self, I was just thinking the higher self could recreate the body somewhere else. You think there, and then something more advanced than you, like a higher self, could recreate your physical body in a different place. Just like even when I move my body, I'm moving all these atoms and everything through space. So it could be just something, I think it has to be spiritual or higher or soul level, that your higher self can disappear your body and then recreate it in another place. I think it has to be something like that for.
It's about intent. That I think Chris nailed it when he said it's about intent.
Yeah, not one.
It's about intent, and it's like lifting your finger. You have intent to lift your finger, and you lift your finger, but you don't get into all of the mechanics necessary to make your finger work, or your heartbeat, or your lungs to work. This is all occurring in the background, and most of humankind has no concept of how any of that actually works.
But the real trick is in printing that intent. You can only go so far with that, and then you have to say, thank you, source, but I need the universe to help here.
Chris, about the black state, when matter phase shifts, right? How do you think that this is occurring? Because Ken Shoulders said that the black, if you reduce the electric permittivity of the free space, and by reducing it, he says that the charge and the mass can be masquerade. So do you think that too, that in order to make matter, let's say, disappear from our dimension, we need to reduce the either energy density to do it, or what we need to do?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of mechanisms to achieve that. I think Ken's view on the approach is one of the ways that he believed would certainly achieve that, and he was pushing forward on his approach. It's kind of like the reduction of radioactivity of a radioisotope. There's at least 3 different ways to do it, and Ken's use of charge clusters is one manner to achieve that. One of the interesting things there there are a few others. One is there's ways of using electron bombardment, and there's other particle bombardment techniques that we can do as well. The what is the part of the solution to this question is really what is the nature of mass? And so mass is a property. It's and we all are very, mass is mass. It's something that we're all very aware of. Things have mass, and the question is, why do things have mass? I mean, it's a very challenging topic, because what is the property? We all have these theories about what is light, what is gravity, but more importantly, what is this property we call mass?
Yeah.
And how does mass come into being? What is this? You could almost say, what is the fundamental particle for mass? And we don't know that yet. And I think, the question you're ultimately asking is, what really is mass? And that ties into the nature of matter itself. And so that's something that we, as humans, we still need to go back and figure this one out. And this ties back into your third question, or your second question, which is the nature of teleportation, or the nature of movement throughout the cosmos. Well, if you're moving things throughout the cosmos, you're moving yourself or you're moving an object, that really ties into mass. So how do you get a mass, which is a very clearly defined physical property? You drop a rock on your foot. That's a very clear example of mass. Everything has mass except presumably light and maybe some other examples. But what is this property called mass, which all of a sudden, if you are doing a teleportation, you're through some methodology, probably related to quantum entanglement, from one distance to another distance, from one point to across a distance. And so how does that how do you transmute? And that's really what needs to be explored. And that was, when you get into the nature of anti-gravity, well, it's really not so much anti-gravity, it's control of mass.
Yes.
And
yes.
this is a this is a philosophical thing. Yeah, and inertia and all
consciousness.
So so, and does consciousness have mass?
Consciousness create.
So this is, and I do not know, really what mass is. So these are the fundamental things that it takes a lot of thinking and some experimentation. It can be a very expensive, or it could be a very inexpensive project. But once we have a good idea of what the nature of mass is, then I think you've answered your question. And so what I would to answer probably most of these questions, and this gets back to a quote that many bright people have said over the years that I've adopted. Most thing is just F equals ma. 90% of what we're doing is F equals ma. And once we figure out what m really is, and the property that derives m, well, then maybe F equals ma is mostly everything.
So force equals mass times acceleration.
90%.
Yeah. And so famously, Feynman said the same thing, Chris. He said, we can't define force because we can't define mass.
True. Well, that's the thing.
We gotta love Richard.
You can describe mass and you can describe force, but you don't actually know what they are. Describe them.
Yes. We don't really know what it is.
You don't know what they are. You don't really.
That's the problem.
That's where it comes. Could consciousness,
we have a whole
could consciousness create mass? If consciousness is fundamental, consciousness could create mass.
Well, yes, it can. And light, we know that. And this is probably one of the greatest achievements of our scientific community in 50 years. We demonstrated at the Stanford Linear Accelerator that we can, in fact, create mass from light.
Yeah.
And so that is huge. That is the nature of creation itself. So you can get something from nothing. So we know that now. We absolutely have laboratory evidence that we can get something from nothing.
Yeah.
Or like the universe, or like material world being frozen consciousness. Consciousness, matter could come from consciousness. Mass could come from consciousness. The idea that the physical world is kind of frozen form of consciousness or a solidified form of consciousness. So that consciousness being foundational could consciousness brings about mass. So consciousness could dissolve mass and put it somewhere else. You know, so
Mass is frozen energy. That's another one.
I
Chris,
think
here's a quick question. Hold on just a sec, Gabe. In a non-abelian, non-flat space, Minkowski, this is physics, photons have mass in a torsion field. So that is something that Puthoff has talked about, Bearden has talked about, is interesting. And that here we have this goddamn veil between our classical physics world and quantum mechanics, which nobody understands. Richard Feynman already made that point 70 years ago. Nobody understands quantum mechanics. But if we can create a potential in the quantum vacuum, pinch, poke, torque the shit out of the ZPE field, whatever, then we can give photons mass. You know that we have warped the space-time metric, essentially. And so, again, it shines a bright light on us trying to understand our linear time world, classical physics, 80% of which we could probably throw out completely. It's so bastardized and messed up. And then the opposite side in being the quantum world, where you could say, okay, everything is quantum. I'm sick and tired of figuring out what the hell Maxwell and Lorentz had wrong 150 years ago and just say everything is quantum and start with a fresh slate. And now gravity is a product of temporal anisotropy, three-dimensional temporal anisotropy. It is not a fundamental force, and mass is essentially a frequency simulation where time has a path, and it has now created a geometric resonance. And now you have mass. It's essentially frozen energy. All this stuff has been floating around out there for years, and academia refuses to address it because underlying it, just like Brendan is saying here, underlying everything is the woo-woo factor, consciousness. And so the Shroud of Turin shows up on NASA's quantum computer here a few months back, and those pussies turn the damn thing off and run for cover and have psychological trauma and everything else because they refuse to acknowledge consciousness.
Right. Well, yeah, well, that's why you just can't get too tied into the world of academia, because it's a religion unto itself, and they're focused on their particular world, and there's a lot of people that just they just like comfort and order, and they like a place in the world, and it becomes a peer pressure thing. And there's a lot of topics that delve into that. Is after a while, when things become evident enough, they just change. And the problem is that it's the nature of mankind. We're very programmable beings. I think we are created for a very specific mission, and to deviate from that mission is really hard. But the fact is that we can deviate from that mission, and historically, it just becomes really painful. And so, the best thing you can do is, as has been demonstrated by the United States for many years, is if you can get a product out that a lot of people like. They don't really. People generally don't care how things work.
Yeah.
And they care that they do work. And so getting out a product, introduce some different techniques and technologies that maybe have breakthrough science, then you can get these new ideas out there. And perhaps the atom bomb, which has been a topic of this whole weekend, and who has it, is a technology that the academic community knew about it or knew about the idea of conversion of matter into energy for decades and even centuries. And this is probably something that dates back to thousands and thousands of years ago conceptually. And there's always been an idea of man that we can achieve these sorts of things, just like the idea that we can achieve flight. But it took, a military industrial need to push it into existence. And even the Germans, I mean, now there's all this talk of heavy water reactors. Well, the Germans came up, Heisenberg was running the German heavy water reactor. And I'm always scratching my head. So I was just going to build a nuclear reactor in my backyard. I'd just build a heavy water reactor because it's really not challenging to do. It's almost a natural thing to build. And there have been naturally occurring nuclear reactions that have been moderated in Africa by water. And so these are not mega technological achievements. And this is why, Iran and other countries are able to achieve a heavy water reactor in rapid time. And there's more and more heavy water reactors out there. And they're a good design, in generally speaking. They work. But to get through that mental leap to build a nuclear reactor or to even explore the world took a major breakthrough intellectually, and it needed to be supported. And that's the case with everything, because the academic scientific community is more likely to just say, no, we know everything there is to know. There isn't anything new under the sun, and you can't convince us otherwise. And that's just how they sit.
And Ken Shoulders wrote about that a lot. He was so frustrated.
Yes, very frustrating.
Yeah,
very, 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 very frustrating.
Hey, Chris.
And so now we're.
Sorry. You can continue.
No. I'll just rant on about this. So it's
Okay. So
it's venting my own frustration.
It's just a thing that I want to add to your commentary about mass is about the nature of charge too. Charge is also very important because is the charge that, let's say, define if something is intangible or not. Because, for example, you have physics saying that dark matter, the hypothetical dark matter, could pass through things because it have mass but doesn't have charge. So it is an intangible matter, let's say it. So the thing is that I think we need to find a way to nullify mass and charge, but a way to not affect the object itself. Because if we affect the object itself, we will unmake the object. It will not be more stable. So I think it needs to be a way that the object is still stable, but for us, it seems that it doesn't have charge and mass. So just it's that I want you to.
Very interesting. Yeah, just a good comment, Gabe. I think I would also add to that spin. I think that at its quark level, spin is really, really critical, particularly when you're studying three-dimensional time and trying to make sense out of that.
I think it's the spin, but I think it's the precession that happens.
The wobble. Yes.
It's the wobble. That's the most important thing, and I think that's one of the keys to controlling some of these technologies.
That may be your reciprocating universe, right, Ed?
I don't know if Chris knows that he's muted. He may not.
No. I do. No, and I'm delighted that spin and wobble was introduced to the conversation. So
cool.
I'll concur.
Chris, maybe just wrapping up, what can you tell us about the prototype for the hover car? When and how far along are you? And
so the whole hover car program that I've said in the past ties into our vertical takeoff fighter program to some degree, but it also doesn't. And so we have a couple different propulsion techniques for the hover car. It's becoming kind of it's always been a big priority, and pushing that forward is something that we're actively working on. We have the design configuration figured out, but the design itself, the shape of the vehicle doesn't really matter too much. It's a streamlined aerodynamic shape, and either in 2 doors or 4 doors. And
Yeah.
so, you've already seen the hinted shape, and we'll be, putting out more. But our approach has kind of shifted to focus on, let's just build the thing and get it flying. And
Yeah.
there's been a few major updates. We've been concentrating on our commercial airliner project, which has become a very big thing.
Yes.
Some of the fighter projects. So it's kind of in a parallel. It's like we're doing 3 parallel things. One is the airplane business, the hover car business, and then the space business. At the same time, we're looking at the automotive side, and the automotive side really is almost a precursor to the hover car. And there's a the best competitor you can ever have is yourself. And so we're making a lot of our own things obsolete. But the hover car has turned into a really kind of the test program, the test center for all of these exotic technologies.
Oh, very cool.
And so
Chris, how many people are working in Savadi? Do you have offices? How many employees?
Yeah, we've got a team of over 100 people right at the moment. We have our main office in Niagara Falls, New York, 9400 Porter Road. And we just signed an agreement on Sunday, the 25th of May, to basically move forward with the SM920 airliner project, which will result in another large facility here in the United States and another large facility outside of the United States. And we'll be bringing on probably quite a few people. The whole program is going to employ about 5,000 people.
Wow.
Initially for about 5 years, and then once it gets in production, we're looking at about 16,000 people.
Wow.
So it is a big event. Our current facility is about 180,000 square feet on 20 acres. It's large enough to prototype our airliner. And the question is, are we going to continue doing significant business in New York, or will the New York facility really just be a prototyping center? And that gets into the politics,
Right.
because we're exploring a lot of other sites. And so we've got a news release, and we're not really doing big press releases that we send to Aviation Week. We do a little bit of that, but we mostly keep it just within a limited circle, just to the industry and to like on shows like this. But we're not really pushing out until we are further along with the actual prototype of the airliner. So the airliner is pretty much our large conventional aircraft. It replaces the 737 and the Airbus A320. It gets 30 to 50% greater efficiency, but it still looks like an airplane. It's a good-looking airplane, but it's an airplane. We can put a lot of neat technologies into that, but still very focused on being an airliner. So it's something that years ago I wouldn't want to do at all because it wasn't very exciting technology. Well, after being beaten beaten over the head by the world, you decide, well, let's just make something that everybody can relate to. And an airliner is a really good product, and there's a market need, and it doesn't really interfere with the system too much.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact,
although you have other projects, or this.
I was going to say, Chris, that I was going to say that this next interview that we're going to do, we're going to talk a lot about the airliner and a lot about the new plans that you have to build it and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I did get the computer back up and running. I was afraid that my computer was toasted remotely, and it's not.
Okay. Good.
So if you wanted to do that interview, we probably just as soon go ahead and do it, and this would cover probably all these these
Okay.
things, and we don't need to merge it. So I'm ready.
Okay.
Just need to make sure I can connect.
I'll tell you what, we'll finish this one, and that way Brandon can get the recording, and then I'll do another Zoom call up and send it to you and Brandon, and then we can jump on and carry on with the conversations and go into some of the stuff we're going to go into in the interview.
Okay.
So I really appreciate you coming into the group, the physics group, SubQuantum Kinetics group, that was, part of Paul Violette's work, and talking to everyone. Fantastic. And hopefully maybe you can come back. I was going to see if maybe you were interested in coming back when we did the John Hutchison one to go through his paper, or
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
yeah, because you have a real close connection to John, and so do I, because Carmen, who's also in this group, she's not with us this morning. She's known John for like over 40 years. So yeah, it's pretty cool actually.
So Ed, let me know when you do that, and I'll get I'll get Moray King to attend.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I mean, we're going to have Moray King here. If you're interested, we could have you come back for that as well, sometime.
Yeah, that would be neat. Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, he's a walking encyclopedia.
Yeah, and Brett, if it's okay with you, Chris, maybe I'll get Brendan to add you to our list and of this Sunday meeting, and you can just jump in and join whatever you want as well too. You're absolutely welcome.
I sure appreciate that. Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's I can see when I'm available. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. Maybe Brandon, you can shut the recording off, and we'll make sure that we grab that one before I start the next Zoom call.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Cheers. Bye. I just turn off the recording now.